Zephyr clutched the small metal object against his scaled chest, careful not to pierce it with his sharp claws. The tiny aircraft barely fit in his young dragon hands, its once bright red paint now faded and chipped from countless adventures. One wing hung at an awkward angle, and the plastic propeller had long since stopped spinning. But, to Zephyr, it remained the most precious thing in the entire galaxy. The 6-year-old dragon had found the toy 3 cycles ago in the ruins of an abandoned human settlement on the outer rim of Sector 7. His parents had warned him countless times about venturing into the dead zones. But curiosity had always been stronger than fear. While exploring the crumbling buildings, something glinting in the sunlight had caught his attention. Half buried beneath fallen concrete and twisted metal, the little red plane had called out to him like a lost treasure waiting to be discovered. From the moment he pulled it free from the rubble, Zephyr knew this was special. The craftsmanship was unlike anything he had seen before. Every rivet, every curve, every detail had been carefully designed and built with love. Even damaged as it was, the plane possessed a beauty that made his heart race with excitement. He could imagine it soaring through the clouds, performing loops and barrel rolls, carrying brave pilots on daring missions across distant worlds. Zephyr spent hours each day playing with his treasure. He would lie on his belly in the soft grass behind his family's cave, making whooshing sounds as he guided the plane through elaborate flight patterns. In his imagination, the tiny aircraft became a mighty starfighter, defending peaceful colonies from space pirates and alien invaders. Sometimes it was a rescue ship, swooping down to save stranded travelers on hostile planets. Other times it carried important messages between far-off civilizations, its brave pilot risking everything to deliver hope to those who needed it most. His parents, Thunderclaw and Emberwing, watched their son's obsession with growing concern. Dragons were supposed to value strength, power, and the accumulation of gold and precious gems. They were apex predators, feared throughout the galaxy for their size, intelligence, and devastating breath weapons. Yet here was their youngest child, completely enchanted by a broken piece of human technology no bigger than his paw. "It's not natural," Thunderclaw grumbled one evening as the family gathered for their weekly hunt. His massive frame cast long shadows across the cave walls, and his golden eyes gleamed with disapproval. "Dragons collect treasure, not trash. That thing isn't even worth melting down for scrap metal." Emberwing, slightly more patient but equally puzzled, tried a gentler approach. "Perhaps if we found him some proper toys," she suggested, her voice carrying the musical quality that made her such an effective negotiator with other dragon clans. A nice set of jeweled miniatures, or maybe some rare crystals he could arrange and display. But Zephyr had no interest in traditional dragon treasures. Whenever his parents brought home glittering prizes from their raids, he would examine them politely before returning to his beloved airplane. The rubies, emeralds, and diamonds that drove other dragons to madness held no appeal for him. They were beautiful, certainly, but they couldn't fly. They couldn't carry him away on imaginary adventures to distant stars and mysterious worlds. The other young dragons in their clan found Zephyr's behavior deeply strange. During their weekly gatherings, while his age-mates competed to see who could breathe the hottest flames or lift the heaviest boulders, Zephyr would sit quietly in a corner, carefully examining every detail of his toy plane. He memorized each scratch, each dent, each faded marking on its surface. He knew exactly where the paint had chipped away and where small pieces of metal had bent out of shape. "Why don't you get a real vehicle?" asked Scorchscale, a dragon only slightly older than Zephyr but already showing promise as a future clan warrior. "My parents captured a human cargo hauler last week. It's got real engines and everything. Much better than that piece of junk you're always carrying around." Zephyr shook his head firmly. "This isn't junk," he replied with quiet dignity. "It's special. Someone made it with their own hands. They put part of their heart into it." Scorchscale snorted, sending small puffs of smoke from his nostrils. "Humans don't have hearts," he said with the confidence of youth. "They're just weaklings who build things for us to take. Father says they exist to serve the stronger races." "That's not true," Zephyr protested, though he kept his voice low to avoid drawing attention from the adult dragons nearby. "Humans are clever. They build amazing things. Look at all the details on this plane. Every part fits perfectly with every other part. They must be very smart to create something like this." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Zephyr's older sister, Crystal Wing. At 15 cycles old, she was already considered a promising young adult, her scales gleaming with the deep purple hue that marked her as a potential clan leader. She had been away for several weeks, training with the elite dragon forces that protected their sector of space. "Little brother," she said warmly, settling her massive bulk carefully next to Zephyr's much smaller form. "I see you still have your little flying machine." Zephyr nodded, holding the plane protectively. "It's been keeping me company while you were gone," he said. "I've been imagining all the places it might have flown before I found it." Crystal Wing studied the toy with new interest. During her training, she had encountered many different alien technologies and learned to appreciate the engineering skills of various species. "You know," she said thoughtfully, "the humans really were exceptional builders. The instructors told us that before the Great War, human engineering was considered some of the finest in the galaxy. They could make machines that lasted for centuries without maintenance." This information filled Zephyr with excitement. "Really? Do you think my plane is that old?" "It could be," Crystal Wing replied. "The design looks like the aircraft they used during their golden age of exploration. Small vessels like this were often carried aboard larger ships as emergency craft or for short-range reconnaissance missions." Zephyr's imagination immediately began spinning new stories. Perhaps his plane had once belonged to a brave human explorer, venturing into uncharted regions of space to make contact with new civilizations. Maybe it had been used to scout dangerous asteroid fields or to search for lost colonists on hostile worlds. The possibilities seemed endless, each more thrilling than the last. "Why did the humans disappear?" Zephyr asked, a question that had been bothering him since he first found the toy. Crystal Wing's expression grew serious. "They didn't exactly disappear," she explained carefully. "After the Great War, most of them scattered across the galaxy. Some joined other species as workers or traders. Others went into hiding on remote worlds. A few even became mercenaries or bounty hunters. But their civilization as we knew it, that ended when their homeworld was destroyed." The young dragon felt a deep sadness wash over him. The thought of the humans losing their home made his chest tight with emotion. "Were they bad?" he asked. "Is that why everyone fought against them?" "No, little one," Crystal Wing said gently. "They weren't bad. If anything, they were too good. The humans had this strange habit of helping everyone, even people who were trying to hurt them. They would risk their lives to save complete strangers. Other species found that behavior threatening." Zephyr looked down at his toy plane with new understanding. Suddenly, its battered condition took on deeper meaning. This wasn't just a toy that had been accidentally broken. This was a survivor just like the humans who had built it. It had endured loss, damage, and abandonment, but it was still here, still whole despite everything that had happened to it. "I want to take care of it," Zephyr announced with sudden determination. "If the humans can't look after it anymore, then I will." Crystal Wing smiled at her little brother's fierce declaration. "That's very noble of you," she said. "But you know it can't actually fly anymore, right? The wing is bent, and I don't think that propeller will ever spin again." "Maybe not," Zephyr admitted. "But I can still imagine it flying. And maybe someday, I'll find a way to fix it." His sister's expression grew thoughtful. "You know," she said slowly, "there might be humans who still remember how to repair things like this. The war ended a long time ago, and some of them have started working openly again. I heard rumors about a human settlement in the Kepler Nebula where they've been rebuilding their technology." Zephyr's eyes widened with hope. "Really? Do you think they would help me fix my plane?" "I don't know," Crystal Wing replied honestly. "Dragons and humans don't exactly have a friendly history. Most humans are still afraid of us. And our parents would never allow you to visit a human settlement." The hope in Zephyr's expression dimmed, but didn't completely fade. "Maybe someday," he said quietly, "when I'm older and can make my own decisions." "Maybe," his sister agreed. "But until then, you can keep it safe. Keep imagining all the wonderful places it might fly someday." As the days passed, Zephyr's devotion to his toy plane only grew stronger. He created elaborate stories about its adventures, each one more detailed and exciting than the last. He learned to hold it in ways that wouldn't cause additional damage, and he found soft materials to cushion it when he had to put it down. At night, He would place it carefully next to his sleeping spot, one protective claw resting gently on its surface. The other dragons gradually stopped commenting on his unusual behavior, though they continued to watch him with puzzled expressions. Even his parents began to accept that their youngest child was simply different from other dragons. They might not understand his fascination with human artifacts, but they could see how much joy it brought him. However, not everyone in the clan was willing to tolerate Zephyr's eccentricity. Elder Ironscale, the clan's military commander and Thunderclaw's older brother, had always been suspicious of anything that seemed to soften dragon nature. He viewed Zephyr's attachment to the human toy as a dangerous weakness that could spread to other young dragons. The boy needs proper guidance, Ironscale declared during a clan leadership meeting. This obsession with human technology is unhealthy. It makes him weak, and weakness in one dragon affects the entire clan's reputation. Thunderclaw found himself in the difficult position of defending his son while acknowledging his brother's concerns. Zephyr is still very young, he said diplomatically. Many dragonlings go through phases before they find their true calling. This isn't a phase, Ironscale growled. I've been watching him for months now. He shows no interest in proper dragon activities. He doesn't practice his flame breath, he avoids combat training, and he spends all his time playing with that pathetic piece of scrap metal. If we don't intervene soon, he'll never develop into a proper warrior. Emberwing spoke up from her position near the cave entrance. Perhaps warfare isn't his destiny, she suggested carefully. Dragons can serve the clan in many ways. We need engineers, diplomats, scholars. We need strength. Ironscale roared, his massive frame tensing with anger. The galaxy is full of threats. Every dragon must be prepared to fight to defend our territory and our way of life. There's no room for weakness or sentimentality. The argument continued for hours, with various clan members offering their opinions on how to handle the situation. Some agreed with Ironscale that Zephyr needed stricter discipline and forced participation in traditional dragon activities. Others sided with his parents, believing that the young dragon should be allowed to find his own path. Meanwhile, unaware of the debate raging over his future, Zephyr continued his daily routine of caring for his precious toy. He had developed an almost ritualistic approach to handling it, always checking for new damage and gently cleaning away any dust or debris that might have accumulated on its surface. One afternoon, while exploring a new area of the clan's territory, Zephyr discovered something that made his heart race with excitement. Hidden in a deep ravine, partially covered by fallen rocks and tangled vegetation, was the wreckage of what appeared to be a human spacecraft. Unlike the ruins where he had found his toy plane, this crash site looked relatively recent. Zephyr approached carefully, his young dragon senses alert for any signs of danger. The ship was small, probably designed for a crew of 2 or 3 humans at most. Its hull was cracked and scorched, and one of the engine pods had been completely torn away in the crash. But, amazingly, parts of the vessel appeared to be intact. As he moved closer, Zephyr heard something that made him freeze in place. Soft sounds were coming from inside the wreckage. Voices. Human voices. The young dragon's first instinct was to flee. Everything he had been taught told him that humans were dangerous, that they couldn't be trusted, that they would try to harm any dragon they encountered. But something kept him rooted in place. These voices didn't sound threatening. They sounded sad, frightened, in pain. Very carefully, Zephyr crept to the edge of the crash site and peered through a crack in the ship's hull. Inside, he could see 2 figures huddled together in what remained of the cockpit. They were definitely human, just as he had suspected, but much smaller than he had expected. One appeared to be an adult, probably female based on the voice, while the other looked like a young human child. The adult human was clearly injured. Her left arm hung at an unnatural angle, and there was blood on her forehead. She was trying to comfort the child, who couldn't be much older than Zephyr himself in relative terms. Both of them looked terrified and exhausted. Zephyr found himself facing an impossible decision. Everything in his upbringing told him to leave these humans to their fate, or better yet, to alert the adult dragons so they could deal with the intruders appropriately. But, looking at the injured woman and frightened child, all he could think about was the toy plane in his cave and the stories Crystal Wing had told him about human kindness. These were the people who had built his precious airplane. These were the clever, caring beings who had put their hearts into their creations. They needed help, and he was the only one who could provide it. Taking a deep breath to steady his nerves, Zephyr began to slowly back away from the crash site. He needed time to think, to plan, to figure out how he could help without putting himself or the humans in even greater danger. The adult dragons would never understand. If they discovered injured humans in their territory, the result would be swift and final. As he made his way back toward the clan caves, Zephyr's mind raced with possibilities. He was too young and too small to move the humans to safety by himself. He had no knowledge of human medicine or how to treat their injuries, and he certainly couldn't bring them into dragon territory without triggering a violent confrontation. But there had to be something he could do. The woman and child were clearly in desperate need of help, and time was running out. If their injuries were as serious as they appeared, they might not survive much longer without proper medical attention. That evening, as his family settled in for their nightly rest period, Zephyr lay awake staring at his toy plane. In the dim light filtering through the cave entrance, it seemed to gleam with its own inner light, as if trying to tell him something important. He thought about all the stories he had imagined over the past 3 cycles, all the adventures and heroic deeds he had attributed to this small metal aircraft. Now he had a chance to write a real story, to perform a truly heroic deed. It wouldn't be easy, and it would almost certainly be dangerous. But, for the first time since finding his precious toy, Zephyr felt that he understood its true purpose. It hadn't been sent to entertain him or to serve as a plaything for his imagination. It had been sent to teach him about courage. The next morning arrived with the pale light of their system's twin suns filtering through the cave entrance. Zephyr had barely slept, his mind churning with plans and worries about the crashed humans. He clutched his toy plane tighter than usual as he made his way to the communal eating area, trying to act as normal as possible while his thoughts remained fixed on the injured woman and child hidden in the ravine. His parents noticed his distracted behavior immediately. Dragons were naturally observant creatures, and Thunderclaw's parental instincts were particularly sharp when it came to his youngest son's well-being. "You seem troubled this morning, little flame," Emberwing said gently, using the pet name she had given him as a hatchling. "Did you have bad dreams?" Zephyr shook his head quickly, perhaps too quickly. "No, mother. I'm fine. Just thinking about flying." It wasn't entirely a lie. He had been thinking about flying, specifically about how desperately he wished he could fly well enough to carry the injured humans to safety. At 6 cycles old, Zephyr's wings were still small and weak. He could manage short gliding flights from high perches, but sustained flight was still several years away. Thunderclaw studied his son with knowing eyes. "Perhaps it's time we started your advanced flight training," he suggested. "You've been so focused on that toy of yours that you've neglected developing your natural dragon abilities." "I practice every day," Zephyr protested, which was true. He spent hours each morning working on his wing strength and coordination, though he had never mentioned to his parents that his motivation came from dreams of flying alongside his toy plane rather than mastering traditional dragon aerial combat techniques. "Gliding exercises aren't enough," his father continued. "Uncle Ironscale has agreed to begin proper flight instruction with you next week. Real dragon flying with combat maneuvers and territorial patrol techniques." The mention of Uncle Ironscale made Zephyr's stomach twist with anxiety. The clan's military commander had never hidden his disapproval of Zephyr's gentle nature and unusual interests. Flight training with Ironscale would be intense, demanding, and would leave little time for anything else. More importantly, it would make it nearly impossible for Zephyr to slip away to help the crashed humans. "Can't it wait a little longer?" Zephyr asked, trying to keep the desperation out of his voice. "I'm still working on building my wing muscles." Thunderclaw's expression grew stern. "Your uncle believes you've been coddled too long. He thinks intensive training will help you focus on what's truly important for a young dragon." Zephyr nodded reluctantly, knowing that arguing would only make his parents more suspicious. As soon as the family finished their morning meal, he excused himself and flew as quickly as his young wings could carry him toward the ravine. He needed to check on the humans and figure out how to help them before his freedom was restricted by Uncle Ironscale's training regimen. When he reached the crash site, Zephyr's heart sank. The sounds from inside the wreckage were much weaker than they had been the day before. The woman's voice was barely audible, and the child had fallen silent altogether. Time was running out much faster than he had hoped. Gathering his courage, Zephyr approached the breach in the ship's hull and carefully poked his head inside. The sight that greeted him was even worse than he had feared. The adult human was unconscious now, her breathing shallow and irregular. The child was awake but clearly weak, his small human face pale and streaked with tears. When the boy saw Zephyr's dragon head appear in the opening, his eyes went wide with terror. He tried to scramble backward, but his movements were clumsy and slow. He was obviously dehydrated and possibly suffering from exposure. "Please don't hurt us," the child whispered in standard galactic common, the universal language that most spacefaring species used for communication. "My mom is really sick. She needs help." Zephyr felt his heart break at the desperation in the young human's voice. Very slowly, he withdrew his head and then spoke from outside the ship, keeping his voice as gentle as possible. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said softly. "My name is Zephyr. I want to help, but I need you to trust me." There was a long silence from inside the wreckage. When the boy finally spoke again, his voice was filled with confusion. You're a dragon. Dragons don't help humans. Everyone knows that." "I'm different," Zephyr replied, and realized as he said it that this was perhaps the truest thing he had ever spoken aloud. "What's your name?" "Marcus," came the hesitant reply. "My mom is Dr. Sarah Chin. We were traveling to the research station on Kepler 442b when our ship had an engine failure. We've been here for 3 days. 3 days. Zephyr's mind raced as he calculated how long the humans had been without proper food, water, or medical attention. It was amazing they had survived this long, but their condition was clearly deteriorating rapidly. "Marcus, I need to ask you some questions," Zephyr said, settling down outside the ship so his voice would remain calm and reassuring. "Is your mother a medical doctor?" "She's a research scientist," Marcus replied. "She studies alien biology and medicine. That's why we were going to the research station. She's supposed to help set up a new medical facility there." This information gave Zephyr hope. If Dr. Chun was a medical researcher, she might know how to treat her own injuries if she regained consciousness. But first, she needed immediate care to stabilize her condition. "I'm going to bring you some water and food," Zephyr announced. "But I need you to promise me something. You can't tell anyone else that I'm helping you. Other dragons. They wouldn't understand." "Why are you doing this?" Marcus asked, his young voice filled with wonder. "Why would you risk helping us?" Zephyr thought about his answer carefully. How could he explain the connection he felt to these humans through his beloved toy plane? How could he make a human child understand the stories and dreams that had shaped his understanding of what humans truly were? "Because you're not my enemies," he said finally. "You're just people who need help. And helping people in need is the right thing to do." It took Zephyr nearly 2 hours to gather supplies without being noticed by other clan members. He filled a large leaf with fresh water from a mountain stream and collected several pieces of fruit that dragons typically saved for special occasions. He also managed to steal a small medical kit that Crystal Wing had brought back from her military training. When he returned to the crash site, he found that Dr. Chun had regained consciousness. She was alert enough to drink water and eat small amounts of fruit, though her injured arm clearly needed more attention than Zephyr could provide. The medical kit contained basic supplies for treating dragon injuries, but many of the items were too large or inappropriate for human anatomy. "Thank you," Dr. Chan said weakly after she had drunk enough water to speak clearly. "Marcus told me what you're doing for us. I never expected to meet a dragon who would show such kindness." Zephyr felt embarrassed by her gratitude. "I haven't really done anything yet," he replied. "You need proper medical attention, and I don't know how to arrange that without putting all of us in danger." Dr. Chun studied him with intelligent eyes. Despite her injuries and exhaustion, she possessed the keen awareness of a trained scientist. "You're very young for a dragon, aren't you?" she observed. "And you speak standard common very well." "I'm 6 cycles old," Zephyr confirmed. "My sister taught me to speak common when she came back from military training. She said it was important to understand other species." "Your sister sounds wise," Dr. Chan said with a slight smile. "Tell me, do you know if there are any human settlements within flying range of here? Anywhere we might be able to reach if we could repair our ship?" Zephyr's heart leaped with hope. My sister mentioned a human settlement in the Kepler Nebula, but she said it was very far away and that dragons and humans don't usually have friendly relations. The Kepler settlement, Dr. Chun repeated thoughtfully. That's actually where we were trying to go before our engines failed. If we could get our ship running again, we could reach it in a few days. Can you fix the ship? Marcus asked excitedly. Even with your hurt arm? His mother looked around the damaged cockpit with professional assessment. Some of the systems are still functional, she said slowly. The main computer core appears to be intact, and the life support systems are still operational. But we lost one of our primary engine pods in the crash, and the navigation array is severely damaged. Zephyr listened carefully to this technical discussion, trying to understand what would be needed to make the ship functional again. What kind of parts would you need? He asked. Dr. Chun gave him a look of surprise. You're thinking like an engineer, she said approvingly. We would need compatible power coupling units, navigation sensors, and probably some kind of thruster system to replace the damaged engine pod. But finding human-compatible components out here would be almost impossible. What if they weren't human components? Zephyr asked, his mind already forming the outline of a desperate plan. What if you could adapt dragon technology to work with your ship? The human scientist sat up straighter, her injuries momentarily forgotten as her professional curiosity was engaged. That's actually not impossible, she said slowly. Human and dragon technology are based on similar principles. With the right modifications, it might work. But where would we get dragon technology? Marcus asked. It's not like we can just walk into a dragon supply depot. Zephyr's thoughts turned to his toy plane, resting safely in his cave back at the clan settlement. For the first time since finding it, he began to consider the possibility of letting it go. Not abandoning it, but using it in a way that would honor its original purpose. I might know where to get some parts, he said quietly. But I would need help figuring out how to make them work with your ship. Dr. Chen's eyes lit up with understanding. You're talking about reverse engineering, she said, taking existing technology and adapting it for a different purpose. I've done that kind of work before, but never with dragon technology. My toy, Zephyr began, then stopped. How could he explain what his little plane meant to him? How could he make them understand that he was considering sacrificing his most precious possession to save their lives? You have a toy? Marcus asked with interest. What kind of toy? It's a small aircraft, Zephyr admitted. Very old, probably human-made originally. I found it in some ruins a few cycles ago. It's damaged, but all the parts are still there. Dr. Chen's expression grew very serious. Zephyr, are you saying you would be willing to let us use parts from your toy to repair our ship? The young dragon felt his throat tighten with emotion. The thought of dismantling his beloved plane was almost unbearable. But looking at the injured woman and her frightened child, he knew there was really no choice to be made. If it would save your lives, he said quietly, then yes, I would let you use whatever parts you need. Marcus stared at him with amazement. But it's your toy. You must really like it if you've had it for so long. I love it, Zephyr said simply. But toys are meant to make people happy and safe. If my plane can help you get home safely, then it will be doing what it was always meant to do. Dr. Chun reached out with her uninjured hand and gently touched one of Zephyr's claws. That may be the most mature and selfless thing I've ever heard anyone say, she told him. Human or dragon? The praise made Zephyr feel warm inside, but also sad. He had dreamed for so long of finding someone who could repair his precious plane and make it fly again. Now he was planning to destroy it himself in order to save lives. Felt like the right decision, but it still hurt more than he had expected. We should look at the toy first, Dr. Chun said practically. I need to assess what components might be useful and how they could be integrated with our ship systems. It's possible we can make the repairs without completely destroying your plane. This suggestion gave Zephyr a spark of hope. Perhaps there was a way to help the humans escape while still preserving at least part of his treasured possession. I'll bring it back this afternoon, he promised. But I have to be very careful. My parents can't know what I'm doing. Why not? Marcus asked. Wouldn't your parents want to help us too? Zephyr shook his head sadly. Dragons and humans have been enemies for a long time. Most dragons believe humans are weak and dangerous. If my clan found out I was helping you, they would stop me. And they might hurt you. Dr. Chun nodded grimly. The war left deep scars on both sides, she said. Most humans are terrified of dragons, and most dragons view humans as inferior beings to be conquered or eliminated. It takes rare individuals like you to see past old prejudices. I'm not that special, Zephyr protested. I just think everyone deserves help when they're in trouble. That attitude is exactly what makes you special, Dr. Chun replied with a gentle smile. Never lose that compassion, Zephyr. The galaxy needs more beings like you. As the day progressed, Zephyr found it increasingly difficult to concentrate on normal clan activities. During the afternoon flight practice session with his age mates, he kept thinking about the humans hidden in the ravine and the difficult choice he had committed himself to making. His distraction was so obvious that even Scorchscale noticed something was wrong. You're flying like a wounded bird today, the older dragon commented after Zephyr failed to complete a simple aerial maneuver. What's got you so scattered? Just thinking, Zephyr replied vaguely. Sometimes my mind wanders. Scorchscale snorted with amusement. Probably daydreaming about that toy plane of yours again. You really need to find some normal hobbies. If only he knew, Zephyr thought to himself. If Scorchscale could see what he was planning to do with his toy, the older dragon would probably faint from shock. That evening, after the clan had settled in for the night, Zephyr carefully retrieved his precious plane from its resting place beside his sleeping spot. In the dim light of the cave, he examined every detail one more time, memorizing each scratch and dent, each faded marking on its surface. Tomorrow, parts of it might be gone forever, cannibalized to save human lives. But tonight it was still whole, still his, still the most beautiful and perfect thing in his young world. Holding it close to his chest, Zephyr whispered softly to the small metal aircraft. Tomorrow you're going to fly again, he promised. Maybe not the way we imagined, but you're going to help people reach the stars. That's what you were built for, isn't it? To carry people safely through the sky. The plane, of course, gave no answer. But, in Zephyr's imagination, he could almost feel it vibrating with anticipation. Ready to fulfill its destiny at last. Dawn came too quickly for Zephyr's liking. He had spent most of the night lying awake, his toy plane clutched protectively in his claws, trying to memorize every detail of its structure. Soon, parts of it might be gone forever, transformed into components for the human ship. The thought made his stomach hurt, but his resolve remained firm. As the clan began to stir with the morning light, Zephyr carefully wrapped his plane in a piece of soft cloth and hid it in a small pouch he had crafted from leather scraps. He needed to get to the crash site early, before anyone noticed his absence and before Uncle Ironscale arrived to begin the flight training that would severely limit his freedom. The journey to the ravine felt longer than usual, weighted down as it was with the significance of what he was about to do. When he arrived, he found Dr. Chun already awake and alert, apparently having slept better after receiving proper hydration and nutrition. Marcus was also up, though he still looked weak and tired. Good morning, Zephyr. Dr. Chun greeted him warmly. I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday, and I have some ideas about how we might approach the repair process. Zephyr settled down beside the wrecked ship and carefully removed his toy plane from its protective wrapping. In the bright morning light, every detail stood out clearly. The faded red paint, the bent wing, the motionless propeller that had captured his imagination for so many cycles. Marcus gasped when he saw the aircraft. It's beautiful, he exclaimed. It looks just like the training planes they used at the academy where my mom studied. Those were from the golden age of human space exploration. Dr. Chun leaned forward to examine the toy more closely, her scientist's eye taking in every detail. This is remarkable craftsmanship, she said with genuine appreciation. The proportions are perfect and the engineering details are incredibly accurate. Whoever built this had a deep understanding of aerodynamic principles. Can you tell how old it is? Zephyr asked hopefully. The more special his plane proved to be, the more difficult it would be to sacrifice parts of it. Dr. Chun carefully turned the plane over, examining markings that Zephyr had noticed but never understood. These serial numbers and manufacturing codes. Marcus, look at this. This isn't just a toy. This is a scale model of the Starling-class reconnaissance aircraft. They were used by deep space exploration teams during the Harmony era. Marcus's eyes widened with excitement. The Harmony era? That was when humans were first making peaceful contact with other species, right? Exactly, his mother confirmed. This little plane represents one of the most hopeful periods in human history. The Starlings were specifically designed for peaceful missions, first contact protocols, scientific surveys, humanitarian aid delivery. They never carried weapons. Zephyr felt a warm glow of pride spreading through his chest. His beloved toy wasn't just any aircraft. It was a symbol of hope and peace. The knowledge made him even more certain that he was making the right choice in offering it to help save these humans. There's something else, Dr. Chun continued, pointing to a small inscription near the plane's tail. This marking here, it's a craftsman's signature.
MR Rok 2387.
This was hand-built by someone with the initials MR in the year 2387 of the old Earth calendar. That's over 200 years ago, Marcus breathed. This plane is ancient. Dr. Chun nodded solemnly. It's not just a toy, Zephyr. It's a piece of history. Someone put incredible care and skill into creating this model, probably as a tribute to the real aircraft that helped bring peace between different species. The weight of this revelation settled heavily on Zephyr's shoulders. He had always known his plane was special, but understanding its true historical significance made the decision to potentially destroy it even more difficult. Does that change things? He asked quietly. Should we try to preserve it instead of using it for parts? Dr. Chun studied the young dragon's face, seeing the conflict there. That's entirely up to you, she said gently. I won't lie to you. Some of the components in this model could be extremely useful for our repairs. But if you've changed your mind, I completely understand. Zephyr looked down at the plane in his claws, then at Marcus, who was watching him with hopeful eyes, and finally, at Dr. Chun with her injured arm and determined expression. These were people who needed help, people whose lives might depend on his decision. The person who built this, he said slowly, they made it to honor peaceful exploration and helping others, right? That would be my interpretation, Dr. Chun agreed. Then, using it to help you get home safely would be exactly what they intended, Zephyr concluded with growing confidence. It would be honoring their memory and the values they believed in. Dr. Chun smiled with genuine admiration. You have the wisdom of someone much older, Zephyr. The person who built this plane would be proud to know it's in the hands of someone who truly understands its purpose. With his decision firmly made, Zephyr handed the toy plane to Dr. Chun. What do you need me to do? The next several hours passed in intense concentration as Dr. Chun examined both the toy plane and the damaged ship systems. Despite her injured arm, she moved with the practiced efficiency of someone accustomed to working with complex technology. Marcus helped as much as his young hands and limited technical knowledge allowed while Zephyr watched and learned. The navigation sensor array is the most critical component we need to replace, Dr. Chun explained as she worked. Your plane has a miniaturized guidance system that's incredibly sophisticated. With some modifications, it could serve as a replacement for our damaged primary navigation unit. Zephyr watched nervously as she carefully began disassembling a section of his beloved toy. Each component that was removed felt like a small piece of his heart being taken away. But when he saw the excitement in Dr. Chen's eyes as she examined the intricate engineering, he felt a measure of comfort. This is extraordinary work, she murmured, holding up a tiny component no larger than Zephyr's smallest claw. The power coupling efficiency is better than anything in our ship's original design. Whoever built this understood quantum resonance principles that weren't widely known until decades after this was made. Will it work with your ship? Marcus asked eagerly. Better than work, it might actually improve our navigation capabilities beyond what they were before the crash, Dr. Chun replied. But the integration process is going to be delicate. I'll need several hours to properly interface these components with our existing systems. As the day progressed, Zephyr found himself torn between fascination and sadness. Watching Dr. Chun work was like seeing a master artist create something beautiful. Her hands moved with sure precision, adapting the toy plane's components to fit the alien architecture of the human ship. But each modification meant that his plane was becoming less recognizable, more integrated into something else entirely. I know this is difficult for you, Dr. Chun said during a brief break in her work. Losing something precious is never easy, even when it's for a good cause. It's not exactly lost, Zephyr said, trying to convince himself as much as her. It's just changing into something new, something that can help people. That's a very mature way to look at it, she replied. But it's also okay to feel sad about the change. Growing up often means letting go of things we love, so that we can help others or become better versions of ourselves. Marcus had been unusually quiet during the technical work, but now he looked up from where he had been watching his mother's careful modifications. Zephyr, what if there was a way to make your plane fly again? Not just as parts in our ship, but actually fly on its own. Both Zephyr and Dr. Chun turned to look at the young human with surprise. What do you mean? Zephyr asked. Marcus pointed to the components that hadn't yet been removed from the toy plane. Mom's using some parts for navigation, but there are other systems that are still intact. What if we could fix the wing and get the propeller working again? Then you'd have a plane that could actually fly instead of just one you could imagine flying. Dr. Chen's eyes lit up with understanding. Marcus, that's brilliant. The power systems and control mechanisms are separate from the navigation components I need. With a few adjustments, we could absolutely restore the plane's flight capabilities. Zephyr felt his heart skip a beat. The possibility he had never dared to truly hope for was suddenly being offered to him as a gift. You could really make it fly? More than that, Dr. Chun said with growing excitement. The modifications I'm making for the navigation system will actually generate a small surplus of power. We could use that excess energy to upgrade your plane's propulsion system. It might fly better than it ever did originally. The young dragon stared at his toy plane, now partially disassembled but somehow looking more promising than ever before. Instead of losing his precious treasure, he was being offered the chance to see it transformed into something even more wonderful than his imagination had ever conceived. But won't that take longer? He asked, suddenly, worried about the time constraints. You and Marcus need to get to safety as soon as possible. The additional work would only add a few hours to the repair schedule, Dr. Chun assured him. And honestly, having a functional aircraft available could be useful if we encounter any problems during our journey to the Kepler settlement. As if summoned by some evil spell, the sound of approaching wings suddenly filled the air above the ravine. Zephyr's blood turned to ice as he recognized the distinctive wing beat pattern of his uncle Ironscale. The massive dragon was conducting an aerial patrol of the clan's territory, something he did regularly but usually much later in the day. Hide! Zephyr hissed to the humans. Get back in the ship and stay completely silent. Dr. Chun and Marcus immediately scrambled back into the wreckage, pulling pieces of debris over the breach in the hull to conceal the opening. Zephyr quickly gathered up the toy plane and its scattered components, wrapping them hastily in the cloth and shoving the bundle into his leather pouch. The shadow of Ironscale's massive form passed over the ravine as the adult dragon conducted his patrol. Zephyr pressed himself against the rocky wall, trying to remain as invisible as possible while his heart hammered against his ribs. If his uncle discovered the humans, or if he became suspicious about why Zephyr was so far from the clan caves, the terrifying moments stretched on endlessly before the sound of wing beats finally began to fade into the distance. Zephyr waited several more minutes before daring to move, ensuring that Ironscale was truly gone before signaling to the humans that it was safe to emerge. That was close, Dr. Chun said, her face pale with fear. How often do dragons patrol this area? Not usually this early in the day, Zephyr replied, his own voice shaking slightly. Uncle Ironscale must be looking for me. I was supposed to begin flight training with him this morning. The implications of missing his scheduled training session were serious. Ironscale would report Zephyr's absence to his parents, who would organize search parties. Soon, the entire clan would be combing the territory looking for their missing youngest member. I have to go back, Zephyr said reluctantly. If I don't return soon, they'll send out search teams and someone will definitely find you. Dr. Chun nodded grimly. How long do you think we have before it becomes too dangerous for you to return here? Zephyr considered the question carefully. Maybe 2 days at most. If I'm missing for longer than that, they'll expand the search to include areas outside our normal territory. Then we'll work as fast as we can, Dr. Chun decided. I should be able to complete the navigation repairs by tomorrow afternoon. The modifications to restore your plane's flight capability will have to wait until after we've reached safety. The young dragon felt a pang of disappointment, but he understood the priorities. Getting the humans to safety had to come first. Everything else was secondary. "What can I do to help?" he asked. "Bring whatever tools you can find without being noticed," Dr. Chun requested. Metal cutting implements, bonding agents, small precision instruments. Even basic tools could make a significant difference in the repair time. As Zephyr prepared to leave, Marcus suddenly called out to him. "Zephyr, wait. I wanted to say something." The young dragon paused, looking back at the human child who had become so important to him over the past few days. "Thank you," Marcus said simply. "Not just for helping us, but for showing me that dragons can be good people too. Before I met you, I was scared of all dragons. Now I know that being different species doesn't mean we have to be enemies." The words hit Zephyr with unexpected emotional force. In trying to help these humans, he had also helped them understand that dragons could be more than just fearsome predators. Perhaps this was the beginning of something larger than just a rescue mission. "Thank you too," Zephyr replied. "You've helped me understand what humans are really like. You're not weak or dangerous. You're brave and smart and kind. I hope someday all dragons will know that." As he flew back toward the clan caves, Zephyr's mind was already working on plans for the next day. He needed to gather tools and materials without arousing suspicion. He needed to attend at least some of his scheduled activities to avoid further attention from the adult dragons. And, most importantly, he needed to find a way to explain his absence that morning without revealing the truth about his secret mission. The toy plane, wrapped securely in his pouch, seemed to pulse with new purpose against his chest. Soon it would help carry 2 humans to safety. And, if Dr. Chun kept her promise, it might actually fly again under its own power. For the first time since finding the crashed ship, Zephyr allowed himself to truly believe that everything might work out after all. Zephyr's return to the clan caves was met with the expected storm of concern and anger. Uncle Ironscale was waiting in the main gathering area, his massive form radiating disapproval like heat from molten metal. Thunderclaw and Emberwing flanked him, their expressions mixing worry with disappointment. "Where have you been?" Thunderclaw demanded as soon as Zephyr landed. "Your uncle has been waiting for over an hour to begin your flight training." "I was practicing," Zephyr replied, which was technically true. He had been practicing courage, though not the kind his family expected. "I lost track of time." Ironscale's golden eyes narrowed suspiciously. "Practicing what exactly?" "Your flight patterns were erratic when you returned just now. Your wing strokes were uneven, and your landing approach was clumsy." Zephyr's heart sank. His uncle's trained military eye missed nothing. The stress and distraction of his secret mission had indeed affected his flying, and Ironscale was too experienced not to notice. "I was trying some new maneuvers," Zephyr said weakly. "I wanted to impress you during training." "The only thing that impresses me is discipline and punctuality," Ironscale growled. "Wasted talent means nothing if it cannot be relied upon. We will begin your training immediately, and you will give me your complete attention." The next several hours were some of the most challenging of Zephyr's young life. Ironscale pushed him through increasingly difficult aerial exercises, demanding perfect execution of maneuvers that were designed for dragons several years older. Each mistake was met with sharp criticism, each success with the expectation of even better performance. But the physical demands of the training were nothing compared to the mental strain of concealing his true thoughts and concerns. While his uncle barked orders about proper wing positioning and combat flight patterns, Zephyr's mind kept drifting to the ravine where Dr. Chun and Marcus waited in growing desperation. "Focus!" Ironscale roared after Zephyr failed to complete a complex diving maneuver correctly. "Your mind is wandering like a confused hatchling's. What could possibly be more important than mastering the skills that will keep you alive in battle?" "Nothing, Uncle," Zephyr replied automatically, though his heart wasn't in the lie. Ironscale's expression grew calculating. "Perhaps the problem is that you have too many distractions in your life," he said slowly. "Too many frivolous pursuits that prevent you from developing proper dragon instincts." The older dragon's gaze seemed to burn right through Zephyr's skull, as if he could see the hidden pouch containing the toy plane and all the secrets it represented. For a terrifying moment, Zephyr was certain that his uncle knew everything. After tomorrow's training session, Ironscale continued. We will have a discussion about eliminating unnecessary influences from your daily routine. It's time you learned to prioritize what truly matters. The threat was clear, even if not explicitly stated. Ironscale intended to remove anything he viewed as a distraction from Zephyr's development as a proper dragon warrior. The toy plane would be the first casualty of this new regimen. When training finally ended, Zephyr was exhausted both physically and emotionally. Every muscle in his young body ached from the demanding exercises, and his mind was spinning with worry about the implications of his uncle's words. He had perhaps one more day of relative freedom before his secret mission became impossible to continue. That evening, during the family's communal meal, Crystal Wing arrived unexpectedly from another training exercise with the elite forces. Her timing couldn't have been better from Zephyr's perspective. Her presence might distract the adults from their growing concerns about his behavior. "Little brother," she said warmly, settling her large frame next to his much smaller one. "I heard you started advanced flight training with Uncle Ironscale today. How did it go?" "It was challenging," Zephyr replied diplomatically, not wanting to reveal how poorly things had actually gone. Crystal Wing studied his expression with the perceptive eyes that made her such an effective military officer. "You look troubled," she observed. "Is everything all right?" For a moment, Zephyr was tempted to tell his sister everything. Of all his family members, Crystal Wing was the most likely to understand his motivation for helping the humans. She had traveled widely, encountered many different species, and seemed less bound by traditional dragon prejudices. But the risk was too great. Even if Crystal Wing sympathized with his actions, she would be duty-bound to report the presence of humans in their territory to the clan leadership. The result would be swift and final. "I'm fine," Zephyr said instead. "Just tired from all the flying exercises." Crystal Wing didn't look entirely convinced, but she didn't press the issue. Instead, she began telling stories about her recent missions, describing encounters with various alien species and the complex politics of intergalactic relations. "The galaxy is changing," she said thoughtfully. "Many of the old conflicts are giving way to new alliances. Some species that were enemies for centuries are now working together on scientific research and trade agreements." Thunderclaw looked up from his meal with interest. "What about the humans? Are they still scattered and powerless after their defeat?" "Actually," Crystal Wing replied, "some human communities have become quite successful. There are rumors of new human settlements in the Outer Rim that have developed impressive technologies. They're focusing on medical research and peaceful exploration rather than military expansion." Zephyr's heart leaped with hope. This was exactly the kind of information he needed to hear. If human settlements were gaining recognition and respect from other species, then perhaps Dr. Chun and Marcus had a real chance of reaching safety and rebuilding their lives. "I find that hard to believe," Ironscale interjected. "Humans are weak by nature. Without their massive military forces, they have nothing to offer." "That's where you're wrong, Uncle," Crystal Wing said respectfully but firmly. "Human medical technology has become some of the most advanced in the galaxy. Several dragon clans have secretly sought human doctors to treat injuries that our own healers couldn't handle." The conversation continued for another hour, with Crystal Wing providing more details about the changing political landscape of their region of space. Every piece of information made Zephyr more determined to ensure that Dr. Chun and Marcus reached the safety of the Kepler settlement. When the family finally dispersed for the night, Zephyr waited until the cave was quiet before carefully gathering the tools and materials he would need for the next day's work. He managed to collect a small cutting tool, some bonding paste used for repairing dragon armor, and several precision instruments from Crystal Wing's equipment kit. The next morning dawned gray and cloudy, with the threat of storms building on the horizon. Zephyr hoped the weather would provide cover for his activities, but he also worried about the effect it might have on Dr. Chen's delicate repair work. This time, he was more careful about his departure from the clan caves. He left early enough to avoid another confrontation with Ironscale, but not so early as to seem suspicious. He also took a more indirect route to the ravine, using natural terrain features to mask his flight path from casual observation. When he arrived at the crash site, he found Dr. Chun and Marcus both awake and working. Despite her injured arm, the human scientist had made remarkable progress during the night. Several components from the toy plane had already been integrated into the ship's navigation system, and she was in the process of calibrating their performance. "Perfect timing," she said as Zephyr landed beside the wreckage. "I'm at the point where I need those precision tools you promised to bring." Zephyr quickly unpacked his collection of borrowed equipment, spreading them out on a flat piece of debris so Dr. Chun could examine them properly. Her eyes lit up with professional appreciation as she studied the dragon-made instruments. "These are actually superior to anything in our ship's original toolkit," she said admiringly. "Dragon metallurgy has always been exceptional, but I didn't realize how sophisticated your precision engineering had become." As Dr. Chun returned to her work, Marcus approached Zephyr with something in his hands. "I wanted to show you something," the young human said shyly. "I found this in one of our ship's storage compartments." He held out a small digital device that displayed what appeared to be a historical archive. On the screen was an image of an aircraft that looked remarkably similar to Zephyr's toy plane. "It's a record of the original Starling-class reconnaissance ships," Marcus explained excitedly. "I found specifications, mission reports, even some personal accounts from the pilots who flew them." Zephyr stared at the screen with fascination. "They really existed? The real aircraft that my plane is modeled after." "Not only did they exist, but they were some of the most important ships in human history," Marcus replied. "Listen to this mission report from Captain Sarah Martinez, pilot of the Starling 7. Today we made peaceful first contact with the Altarian Council. Their initial fear of our vessel quickly turned to curiosity when they realized we carried no weapons. The Starling's non-threatening design helped establish trust that led to a historic trade agreement." The young dragon felt a deep sense of pride and connection hearing these words. His toy plane wasn't just a representation of human engineering. It was a symbol of hope, peace, and the belief that different species could work together rather than fight. "There are dozens of similar reports," Marcus continued enthusiastically. "Starling-class ships were used for rescue missions, scientific surveys, diplomatic negotiations, and humanitarian aid delivery. They never fired a shot in anger, but they probably prevented more wars than any military vessel." Dr. Chun looked up from her work with a smile. "Marcus has been reading those archives all night," she said. "I think he's as excited about your plane's history as you are." "It makes what we're doing feel even more important," Marcus said earnestly. "We're not just fixing a ship. We're honoring the legacy of peace and cooperation that these aircraft represented." As the day progressed, Dr. Chen's repair work reached a critical phase. The navigation components from Zephyr's toy plane had been successfully integrated, but now she needed to test their compatibility with the ship's other systems. This would determine whether their escape plan was viable or if they needed to find alternative solutions. "Cross your fingers," she said as she activated the modified navigation array. "If this doesn't work, we'll need to completely redesign our approach." The ship's control panels flickered to life with a soft blue glow. Display screens activated one by one, showing system status indicators and navigation data. After several tense moments, Dr. Chen's face broke into a triumphant smile. "We have full navigation capability," she announced. "The integration was even more successful than I hoped. Your plane's guidance system is actually more accurate than our original equipment." Zephyr felt a surge of pride mixed with bittersweetness. His beloved toy had proven its worth beyond his wildest dreams. But, in the process, it had been fundamentally changed. The components that had once made it a perfect model aircraft were now serving a different purpose entirely. "What about the flight system restoration you promised?" he asked hopefully. Dr. Chen's expression grew thoughtful. "That's going to be more complex than I initially estimated," she admitted. "The power modifications I made for the navigation integration changed the energy flow patterns. I'll need to completely recalibrate the propulsion systems." "How long will that take?" "Several hours, at least. And I'll need to do some trial and error testing to get the balance right." She paused, studying Zephyr's disappointed expression. "But I give you my word, I will restore your plane's ability to fly. It may take longer than originally planned, but I won't leave here until it's done." Marcus suddenly looked up from his reading with an alarmed expression. "Mom, we might have a problem. According to these weather reports in the ship's database, there's a massive storm system approaching this region. It could hit within the next 6 to 8 hours. Dr. Chun quickly pulled up the meteorological data on her display screen. The image showed a swirling mass of violent weather covering a vast area of the planet's surface. Storm systems on this world could be devastating, with wind speeds that could tear apart anything not properly sheltered. "We need to get the ship's protective systems online immediately," she said urgently. "The hull damage from our crash means we're vulnerable to debris impact and pressure changes." As if responding to her words, the first gusts of wind began to stir the air around the ravine. What had been a calm morning was rapidly giving way to increasingly unstable weather conditions. Zephyr looked up at the darkening sky with growing concern. "This is going to make it very dangerous for me to return to the clan caves," he said. "Dragons don't fly in severe weather unless it's absolutely necessary." "Then you should leave now while it's still safe," Dr. Chen urged. "We can handle the storm preparations without you." But Zephyr shook his head firmly. "I'm not abandoning you now," he declared. "If you're stuck here during the storm, then I'm staying too." Dr. Chen and Marcus exchanged worried glances. "Zephyr, if you don't return to your clan, they'll organize massive search parties," Dr. Chen pointed out. "The risk of us being discovered will increase dramatically." "I know," Zephyr replied. "But I also know that this storm could damage your ship even more, or create new problems that you'll need help solving. I'm not leaving until I'm sure you can escape safely." As the wind began to pick up more seriously, rattling loose debris around the crash site, all three of them knew that they were committed to riding out the storm together. Whatever consequences that decision might bring, they would face them as a team. The young dragon's choice to stay would soon prove to be more important than any of them could have imagined. The storm hit with a fury that exceeded even Dr. Chen's worst predictions. What began as strong winds quickly escalated into a howling tempest that turned the sky dark as night. Rain fell in sheets so dense that visibility dropped to mere meters, and lightning split the air with deafening crashes that shook the ground beneath their feet. Zephyr huddled close to the damaged ship, using his larger dragon body to shield Dr. Chen and Marcus from the worst of the wind and debris. His scales, designed to withstand extreme conditions, deflected flying rocks and twisted metal fragments that would have been deadly to the more fragile humans. "The hull breach is letting too much water inside," Dr. Chen shouted over the roar of the storm. "If the electronics get flooded, we'll lose everything." Working together despite the chaos around them, the unlikely trio struggled to seal gaps in the ship's damaged hull using emergency materials and improvised solutions. Zephyr's strength proved invaluable for moving heavy debris and holding protective barriers in place, while Dr. Chan and Marcus worked frantically to waterproof the critical systems. Hours passed in a blur of emergency repairs and desperate measures to keep the ship's vital components dry and functional. By the time the storm began to weaken, all three of them were exhausted and soaked to the bone, but their efforts had been successful. The ship's systems remained operational, and Dr. Chen's careful modifications were intact. As the winds finally calmed and patches of blue sky became visible through the breaking clouds, Zephyr realized that his worst fears about the consequences of his absence were about to be realized. In the distance, he could hear the distinctive calls of dragon search parties spreading out across the territory. "They're looking for me," he said with heavy resignation. "The whole clan is probably involved by now." Dr. Chun looked up from checking her equipment for storm damage. "How much trouble are you in?" "More than I can probably handle," Zephyr admitted. "Being missing during a major storm will be seen as either incredibly reckless or evidence that something terrible happened to me. Either way, the search will be thorough and extensive." Marcus appeared from inside the ship, his young face streaked with dirt and worry. "What does this mean for us? Will they find our crash site?" Before Zephyr could answer, the sound of approaching wing beats cut through the post-storm air. But these weren't the distant calls of search parties. This was someone coming directly toward their location, flying with the purposeful speed of a dragon who knew exactly where they were going. "Hide!" Zephyr hissed urgently. "Someone's coming." Dr. Chan and Marcus scrambled back into the ship's interior, pulling debris over the entrance to conceal it as much as possible. Zephyr had just enough time to wrap his toy plane and shove it into his pouch before a massive shadow passed overhead. Crystal Wing descended into the ravine with smooth, controlled movements that spoke of her advanced flying skills. Her purple scales gleamed wetly in the returning sunlight, and her expression was unreadable as she landed nearby. Hello, little brother, she said quietly. I've been looking for you. Zephyr's heart pounded against his ribs. Of all the dragons who might have found him, Crystal Wing was perhaps the best option, but that didn't mean he was safe. His sister was loyal to the clan above all else, and she had sworn oaths as a military officer that couldn't be easily dismissed. How did you find me? He asked, trying to keep his voice steady. You've been coming to this area for several days, Crystal Wing replied. I noticed the pattern in your flight paths. When you didn't return last night, I decided to check the places you'd been visiting recently. She moved closer, her keen eyes taking in details that Zephyr hoped she wouldn't notice. The displaced rocks where they had been working, the unusual tool marks on various surfaces, the faint sense of human presence that his dragon nose could detect, but he hoped hers couldn't. You've been hiding something, Crystal Wing observed.